Just sort of summarizing the 6 kingdoms, and I think you guys had this all filled in. And again, basically we're talking about 3 factors related to these kingdoms. So, how they obtain energy, how many cells they're made of, and whether or not they have a nuclear membrane. So we looked at those. Now, these are the kingdoms, but remember there is a level above kingdom, one larger than kingdom, a more general group called domain. And as far as the domains, there's just 3 domains in which every living thing can be placed into. So all of these, so animals, plants, fungi, and protists, they all are grouped together in one of the domains. Then the bacteria, they are in a separate domain, and archaea is in a separate domain. So this domain here that includes animals, plants, fungi, and protists is called eukarya. And then this one is called bacteria, this one's called archaea. It's really called Monera is the Latin name for bacteria, but we'll say bacteria. So obviously, why are these things? Why is a human in the same domain as a paramecium or an earthworm or a maple tree, okay, or a mushroom? Do those things have anything in common? Does a human and a mushroom, an oak tree, and a paramecium have anything in common? Abby? They're all eukaryotes. Yeah, that's why they're lumped together in this domain, is because all of those are eukaryotes. They all have cells that have a nucleus that holds the genetic information surrounded by a nuclear membrane. Whereas the bacteria and the archaea, they do not. So that's why they're lumped into those domains. Okay, if we look at just some examples of classification of a few different species, a human, a chimp, a cat, a lion, a housefly, we can look at how these different species are classified from domain down to species. Again, all those things are in the same domain, eukarya. They also are all animals, so they're in the same kingdom as well. The human, chimp, house, cat, and lion, they are all vertebrates, so they're in the chordate phylum, versus the housefly, which is an invertebrate. There are several phyla of invertebrates. Arthropod is one of them. There's others like mollusks and crustaceans and sponges. Those are all invertebrate phyla. Okay, if we keep going down to class, okay, these 4 animals, they're all mammal. These 4 vertebrates are all mammals, versus a housefly, which is an insect type of arthropod. Okay, you can see where we go from there. Then for these mammals, the human and the chimp are primates, the house cat's a carnivore, and the lion's a carnivore. Look at the families, okay, see their classification, the genus, and finally the species. So if we look at these, what's the scientific name we should know? This is the only one you really have to memorize is humans. We've said it several times. Scientific name for the human species is what, Segan? Homo sapiens. How about a chimp? What's the scientific name of a chimp? Jake?
Pan-troglodytes?
Yeah, pan-troglodytes. What's important about writing these? What do we have to do it properly, Kira?
The first word is capitalized.
Right, and the second is not. It is lowercaseified. And it's written in either italics or underlined. How about the house cat? What you have is actually incorrect. The one I have is correct up here. You notice a slightly different gauge.
Felis catus?
Felis catus. And the lion is what? What? Felis Felis leo, and then the housefly, Musca domestica. So again, the scientific name is just made up of the genus combined with the species. Okay, a few questions here. Which two taxa do all of the species belong to? Michael? Yeah, they're all, well, but what taxon are those? You're right. So they're in the same domain in the same kingdom, yes. So all of these organisms share three characteristics. Which one do they share here? Multicellular, unicellular. Ian?
Multicellular.
They're all multicellular. Prokaryote or eukaryote? Catherine?
Eukaryote.
They're all eukaryote. Autotroph or heterotroph? Lena? They're all heterotrophs, correct. So if we look at these species, which two are the most closely related? Lucy?
The house cat.
Yeah, the house cat and the lion. And we know that. Why did you choose them, Lucy?
Because they go down farther.
Yeah, they go all the way down to the same genus. Oh, from domain down to genus, they're the same. The only place they become different is at the species level. So they're the most closely related. All right. Our final sort of topic here in this unit, this section of the unit, is something called using a dichotomous key. A dichotomous key is a tool, you could call it, I guess. It's used by scientists or people or whoever to identify an unknown species. And a dichotomous key is really just a series of choices that you read through, and you decide which one applies to the unknown species that you're thinking about or looking at, and then you follow the instructions. Okay? So this is obviously a very simple example, but if you had no idea what these animals were, you could follow through this dichotomous key and figure it out. And basically always start at the top at number 1, and each one is a series of 2 statements. That's what dichotomous means, 2 choices. Okay? And so you read the 2 choices, and one or the other should apply. So if we look at this animal, and we look at choice 1, tentacles present or tentacles absent, what would you say? Present. So then we go, it says, go to 2. Then I read the 2 statements at number 2. 2A, 8 tentacles or more than 8?
8.
Yeah, this has 8 tentacles. Well, it's an octopus. It's identified it for us. We do this animal. Tentacles absent. We go to 4. Pair of giant claws or pink body? Pink body. That's a shrimp. Again, this animal. Tentacles absent, we go to 4, giant claws, crab. Last one, tentacles present, more than 8, I go to 3, tentacles upright, this is a sea anemone. So basically follow through these statements, deciding which one applies, and then I keep going until I've identified that species. There's another example. A little bit different. Let's say I have some finches. Okay, 4 different finches. I don't know much about finches, and I want to figure out what species they are. All right, again, I just follow through my dichotomous key. So if I start by looking at this finch on the top left, and I read the statement, is the beak very thin? The upper beak is much larger than the bottom? Or is the beak relatively heavy, top and bottom nearly equal in size? What do you think? On that? Yeah, relatively heavy, top and bottom about the same. So, go to step number 2. the lower beak smaller than the top beak? Or is the lower beak as large or larger? What would you say there? Someone? Catherine? Yeah, it's about the same as large, maybe even larger. I go to step 3. Does the lower edge of the upper beak have a distinctive bend? Or is it mostly flat? Follows across. Does it have that bend? Yes, it does. You've identified this is a Camarhynchus finch. So again, you don't need to really know much about finches to use this key. If you know what a beak is, and you can just look at the animal, then you can identify it. If I do this one, if I do this one, again, beak top and bottom nearly equal in size. Okay, the lower beak is smaller than the top beak. That is Geospiza. I go to the top, relatively heavy, top and bottom nearly equal in size. I go to 2. Lower beak is large or larger. You need to go to 3. Lower edge mostly flat or has a distinct bend. It's mostly flat. That's a Platyspiza finch. And then the top one, okay, beak is relatively heavy. Or no, beak is very thin. Upper beak is much larger than the bottom. This is a Cercovidia. Okay. Now, before we move on to this, all of our examples are relatively simple and straightforward dichotomous keys. In real life, they get much more complex. So these are some I used in college. So for example, this one, and you can look at these later on, this is Inland Fish of New York State. So this entire book is only about inland fish of New York State, not even the fish living in the oceans. So part of this book is a dichotomous key that if you went fishing, you didn't know what type of fish you had just caught, you could follow through this key and it will walk you through the steps. Starting here, and it's pretty detailed, goes on, and eventually you could identify those fish. And then the rest of the book has some description of all of these various fishes. This one is a key to fruit and twigs of trees in North America. So if you went outside, you picked a branch off a tree, a twig, you could follow through this key, okay, and you can identify what type of tree it came from. Again, it has a series of steps, you just follow through. This one is about vascular plants of the northeast United States and adjacent Canada. So this whole book is just, if you went out and found a plant, you can follow through this key and figure out what it is. If you look at this one later, it's got tiny, tiny writing. It's got lots of different information. There's also sometimes a lot of vocabulary. Like if you don't know what those are, it's difficult to use the key, so it has a big glossary to help you understand. But these are all dichotomous keys. They all are help you to identify an unknown species. What?
Why is this one called a taxonomic key and this one called a
They're the same. They mean the same thing. Right? Dichotomous key, taxonomic key, just different terms for the same thing. All right. If we look at some of these.